Begin the Gemara today, 2 lines from the bottom of Daf Lamed Gimel Amud Beis. So this is the middle of a discussion there. We're trying to figure out what Rab Meir's opinion is. Reish Lakish said that our mission here that says that you pay knas, even in a case where this Malchus follows Rab Meir's opinion, that says loike u'mishalem, that you can do both at the same time. So then the Gemara is trying to figure out whether, according to Rab Meir, are we going to say the same regarding Misa? That even a person that's chayiv Misa will get the death penalty, plus he has to pay as well. And it brings a braisa where it says regarding a person that steals an animal and slaughters it on Shabbos. So over there, what did Rab Meir say? That you're going to be chayiv the Misa because you shechted on Shabbos. That's one of the Lamates Malachis. But you're also going to have to pay for the Geneva, and you're going to have to pay 4 or 5 times for what you stole. So Gemara says, Nus, what do you see over here? That he's chayiv to pay, even though he's chayiv Misa. So right now, the Gemara has 2 answers for this. Right now we're in one answer. Later on, the Gemara is going to bring a second answer. But right now, what the Gemara answered is, the case we're speaking about is, this person did not slaughter the animal himself. A shliach slaughtered the animal for you. And over here, when it comes to this isser of slaughtering someone else's animal, even though usually, if you send a shliach to do it, he's responsible. You're not responsible. But over here, there's a chiddush by the case of Dalet Vehei that you pay 4 or 5 times as much for what you did, that even if you send a shliach, so you are not Machal Shabbos, he was Machal Shabbos. But the Mishaleach, the one that sent him, will be responsible to pay for what happened. And this is the case where Rab Meir says you're going to be chayiv because you're not chayiv Misa. But in a case where you would be chayiv Misa, if you did it yourself, you would not be chayiv to pay. That's the explanation of Rab Meir's opinion. But now the Gemara will focus on the Chachamim. The Chachamim argued in the Braisa, and the Chachamim said that you're potter to pay in this case. So the Gemara now asks, fragt the Gemara, where? If the case of here is that you did not slaughter this animal yourself on Shabbos, you sent a shliach to do it. So my tamay de rabbanan de patri. Why would Chachamim say that you would be potter to pay? If you didn't do the Chilul Shabbos, so you're not chayiv Misa, so there's no kom lei b'derab minei here. There's no reason that you should be potter to pay. You're not chayiv Misa. Answers the Gemara, the reason taka that Chachamim say you're potter has nothing to do with kom lei b'derab minei. It's a completely different reason. Man Chachamim, the Chachamim over here that say that you're potter to pay, who are they? Rab Shimoni. This is Rab Shimon's opinion. The Amma, Rab Shimon said, Shchite she'eina re'uya, anytime you shecht an animal, and the meat that you have here from this animal is not fit to be eaten, lo yishma shchita. It does not qualify to be considered a shchita at all. And therefore, you're not going to be chayiv even for Dalet Vehei. Dalet Vehei you're chayiv when you took someone else's animal and you slaughtered it and you're able to eat from it. But if you're not able to eat from it, it doesn't count as a shchita. Rab Shimon actually does not say it regarding this halacha. He said it regarding another halacha, as Rashi here brings. For example, the halacha of kisui adam. When you shecht, you have to cover the blood. If it's a chaya, you have to cover the blood. But he says, if it's a shchita that you can't eat from it, so then you don't have to cover the blood. That halacha doesn't apply. So the same thing over here. The reason why Chachamim say you potter is because what are we speaking about? We're speaking about a kind of shchita where you're not allowed to have anar from this shchita. What did the Braisa speak about? It spoke about a person that shechted for avodah zarah. When you shecht for avodah zarah, you can't have anar from that. Or the other case the Braisa actually spoke about was a person that shechted a shiur haniskal, an ox that was already paskin, that it has to be stoned to death. Can't have anar from that. Lo yishma shchita. So if this is not a shchita, so therefore the halacha of paying 4 or 5 times as much for what you took from your friend also does not apply. But the Gemara now asks a question on this. This is a good answer if you were shechting for avodah zarah, so you can't eat that. Or v'shoyra niskal, you shechted an ox that the bezdin already said has to be stoned, so you can't eat that. So that you don't have to pay for it either. El shchitas Shabbos, but if you shechted here on Shabbos, one of the cases of the Braisa was you stole from your friend and then you shechted it on Shabbos, or you had a shliach that shechted it for you on Shabbos, but it was done on Shabbos. Shchita royehi. This is actually a shchita that it's kosher and you can eat from it. The Tanan, and the Gemara brings a Mishnah. What does it say? If you shecht on Shabbos and Yom Kippur, even though you did a malacha and therefore you chayiv misa, shchita ksheira, but the shchita is kosher and you can eat from it. So if the shchita is kosher, so then you should be chayiv to pay the dalet vehei 4 or 5 times as much for what you stole and shechted from your friend, because this is a shchita which is kosher. Answers the Gemara, we can say, Savalok Rabbi Yechanan HaSandler. The Braisa here is following Rabbi Yechanan HaSandler's opinion that says that if you shecht on Shabbos, it'll actually be usher for you to eat from this forever. Here the Gemara brings a machlokes, 3 different opinions regarding someone that shechted something on Shabbos. Tanya, we learned in the Braisa, Hamavashal b'Shabbos b'Shegeg. If a person went and cooked on Shabbos food b'Shegeg. Okay, so what happens now? Yoichal. So the first opinion here in this Braisa, which is Rab Meir, he says that you can eat what you cooked on Shabbos b'Shegeg, even on Shabbos itself. B'Meizid, if you cooked on Shabbos purposely, so then lo yoichal. So then you cannot eat from this forever. Right, so the person himself, that is, cannot eat from it forever, but somebody else can. Correct. This is a knas. The fact that you're not allowed to eat from this is a knas midrabanan, that if you did it b'mezid. So that knas only applies b'mezid. Divrei Rab Meir. That's Rab Meir's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda says, b'sheigeg, even if you cooked on Shabbos b'sheigeg, yoichal l'matzah Shabbos. You only can eat from it on matzah Shabbos. But on Shabbos itself, you can't. Okay, even though this whole thing, Rashi explains, it's only a knas, but nevertheless, the knas applies for a sheigeg, like a mezid, and you can't eat it until after Shabbos. The mezid, but if a person cooked on Shabbos b'mezid, lo yoichal oilamis, he is not allowed to eat from this forever. Someone else could, but he will not be allowed to eat from this forever. Rabbi Yechanan HaSandler says, it goes even further than this. B'sheigeg, if you cooked b'sheigeg on Shabbos, yoichal l'matzah Shabbos. You have to wait until after Shabbos to be allowed to eat from this. La'achedim, that is. Only others are allowed to eat from this. But he himself is never allowed to eat from it, even if he cooked b'sheigeg. B'mezid, lo yoichal oilamis. B'mezid, so then you're not going to be allowed to eat from what you cooked forever. Loi v'loi la'achedim. Not you are allowed to eat from it, and not anyone else is allowed to eat from it forever. Now, obviously, Rabbi Yechanan HaSandler is so stringent about this. It's not based on a knas. If it would be based on a knas because you did something wrong, so midrabanan, we give him a penalty not to have hana of what he did, there's no reason to be so stringent about this knas. So there has to, and even b'sheigeg, and even that he is never allowed to eat from it b'sheigeg. So Elamai, there's the Gemara here will explain, the basis of Rabbi Yechanan HaSandler's opinion must be something else. My time, the Rabbi Yechanan HaSandler, what's the reason that Rabbi Yechanan HaSandler goes so far? The answer is, Rab Chiya, he was standing at the doorpost of the Nasi, of the house of the Nasi, and he darshaned as follows. It says in the Torah, Ushmartem es Shabbos, keep Shabbos, ki kodeshi lechem. Shabbos is a holy day for you. What do I learn out from this pasuk? Ma kodesh osebachile, just like something that belongs to hektish, you're not allowed to eat. Af ma'isa Shabbos, so too anything that you prepared, that you cooked or you slaughtered, you did a malacha on Shabbos, asurim bachila. It's also asur to eat this for this person forever. So this is in other words, it's not a knas. It's a source from a pasuk min HaTorah where you see that something that you cooked on Shabbos is asur to you forever, and if it's b'mezid, it's asur for anybody forever. Now, he continued and explained, you would think to say, just like when something belongs to hektish, asur bahano, you're not allowed to have any benefit of anything that belongs to hektish, not just eating from it. Af ma'isa Shabbos asur bahano, I would think something that you cooked on Shabbos, it should be asur to have any anah from it, and therefore you're not allowed to sell it and make money from it. Talmud loymar lachem. Therefore the pasuk uses the term kodeshi lachem, which means shelachem yehei. You still own it, you still could have anah from it. You're just not allowed to eat it. Now, the drasha continues, Yachal afilu b'sheigeg. I would think that this is true, even b'sheigeg, that if you cook b'sheigeg, that it should be asur to eat from this forever for anybody. Talmud laima mechaleleh mois yumas. The pasuk there says, someone that desecrates Shabbos dies. What is it speaking about? B'mezid, amarti lecha. The pasuk there is talking about a case of a mezid, when you chayiv misa. V'loi b'sheigeg. It's not speaking about the case of a sheigeg. So what's the point there? The Gemara here is saying, here you see Rabbi Yechanan HaSandler says, if you shecht on Shabbos, you cook on Shabbos, what you shechted, you can't have anah from it forever. And that is what the Chacham was saying before. If you shechted someone else's animal on Shabbos, since you can't eat from it forever, so therefore the obligation which you usually have to pay back 4 or 5 times as much does not apply. Because this is a shchita she'eina re'uya. This is a shchita where you can't eat from it, so therefore there's no payment either. That's the pshat in the Chacham's opinion. But now the Gemara brings that there are actually Amoraim that argued about this. Pligi bar Ravacha and Ravina argued about this. Chad Amar, One of them said, Maisa Shabbos, when you prepared food on Shabbos and you were Mechal Shabbos by doing that, the Eiraisa. So, Minat Torah, you may not eat from it. Like the drasha we just brought, like Rab Chia learned out from the Pasuk, the Shmartem es Shabbos ki Kodeshi. Chadama, but another opinion was the Rabbanon, that it's only a Isser mid Rabbanon. Mandama Deiraisa, the opinion that said that it's Asam Minat Torah to eat from it, Kedamaran, as the Pasuk we just brought. Mandama de Rabbanon, the one that says that it's only Asam de Rabbanon, so he says that Pasuk is no proof. On the contrary, Amakra, when the Torah there says that it's Kodesh, what it's saying is Kodesh Hi. What does Kodesh Hi mean? The day of Shabbos is holy. Hi Kodesh, Vei Maseh Kodesh. The day of Shabbos is holy, and you have to keep and not do any malacha on Shabbos. But regarding any action that you did on Shabbos, a malacha that you did on Shabbos, preparing food, that food does not become sort of sanctified, that you can't touch it, that you can't eat it. So therefore, it does not hold of this rasha. So now, based on this, the Gemara says, "Ulaman da'ama derabbanan." The opinion that says that this that you may not use and you may not eat what you shechted on Shabbos is only asam derabbanan. But minat Torah, what you shecht on Shabbos, you are allowed to eat it. So if so, the question comes back: Mai tamai derabbanan de patri. Why would Rabbanan say that if you stole from someone his animal and then shechted it on Shabbos, that you wouldn't have to pay him? We said before the reason would be you wouldn't have to pay him is because it's a shechita she'eina re'uya, because what you shechted you can't eat. But according to this opinion, minat Torah, what you shecht on Shabbos, you could eat. It's only isam midrabanan, it's a knas midrabanan, but minat Torah it's a shechita re'uya. So if minat Torah it's a shechita re'uya, you should still have to pay 4 or 5 times for what you shechted from your friend. So the Gemara answers, you're right. According to this pshat, you're going to have to say, Kika, Patri Rabbanon. In that brayso, when it says that the Chachamim say that you pater, it's not going on someone that shechted on Shabbos. Ashara, it's going on the other 2 cases there. Besides shechting on Shabbos, there was the case where you shechted for Avodah Zarah, or a case where you shechted a shiur haniskal, a shiur which you can't have any anah of. It was those cases that Chacham was saying that because you can't have any anah from it, so you pater from paying. But if you shechted on Shabbos, according to this opinion, minat Torah, you still could have anah from it, and you still could even eat from it. So therefore, you're going to be chayiv to pay as well. Okay, so this is the conclusion of the explanation of the Chachamim's opinion. But now the Gemara comes back to explaining Rab Meir's opinion. What did Rab Meir say? You shecht someone else's animal that you stole for Avodah Zarah, you're chayiv to pay him. Okay, and the Gemara explained the case was you didn't shecht it yourself. If you shechted it yourself, you'd be chayiv misa, so you'd be potter to pay. But the case is you send someone else to shecht it for Avodah Zarah, you'll be chayiv to pay. Fragt the Gemara, why would you be chayiv to pay? If you send someone to shecht it for Avodah Zarah, so what happens now? Kivin the shachet bei porta. The moment you begin the shechita, you shechted just a tiny drop. It's late. That moment, this animal becomes completely aser. Why? Because the animal was used for Avodah Zarah. So from that second, it's already completely aser b'hana to the owner of the animal. So if so, idach, the rest of the shechita, ki katavach, when he's shechting it, lav the mare katavach. He's not shechting this animal that belongs to the owner. He's shechting something that's already aser b'hana because you began to shecht it for Avodah Zarah. In other words, the Gemara's question is, when are you chayiv to pay for the owner of the animal when you slaughtered his animal? You have to pay him 4 or 5 times as much. If you shechted his animal, then you have to pay him back 4 or 5 times as much. But over here, when you shechted for Avodah Zarah, the very first second that the knife nips the animal for the beginning of the shechita, it already makes it aser b'hana to its owner. When you do the full shechita, which is what you chayev the dalet v'hei for, that full shechita is not shechting the animal of the owner anymore. You're shechting something which is already aser b'hana to him. If so, you're not shechting his animal. So why are you chayev to pay him dalet v'hei? Amar Rava, so Rava answers, what we must say, we're speaking about over here is, ba'aymer, when the person shechts the animal for Avodah Zarah, he says, b'gemar zechvicha hu oivda. That at the conclusion of the slaughtering, that's what should be for the sake of Avodah Zarah. He makes it clear, even though when you do a shechita for Avodah Zarah, it's from the very first second of the shechita that is being done for the purpose of Avodah Zarah. Should become aser b'hana at the very first second. But if he clearly says that it should be for the sake of the Avodah Zarah only when the shechita is complete, so then it does not become aser b'hana until the completion of the shechita. So in such a case, he is shechting the owner's animal. So the Gemara asks, we could ask the same question regarding the shiur haniskal. What's a shiur haniskal? An ox that belonged to an owner that the Bezdin already paskin that because this ox killed somebody, that this ox has to be stoned to death. And therefore the owner really has absolutely no monetary right to this animal. So when you shecht somebody's shiur haniskal, why would you be chayav to pay dalad vehei? The owner is losing nothing. Shiur haniskal lav dideyu the katavach. The question is regarding this shiur haniskal. If you're slaughtering it, you're not slaughtering something that belonged to the owner. He has no monetary value to this. Answers the Gemara, Amar Rabbe. So Rabbe says, you're right, it's going to have to be a very specific case where the person that you took it from and shechted it will have a monetary loss. What is this? What are we speaking about? Kagain shemasrei l'shaymer. The owner gave this ox to a guardian, a shaymer, to keep it for him. Vehizik, and now when it's in the possession of this shaymer, it went and it gored somebody, and because it gored somebody, beis shaymer, when it was in the house of the shaymer, he didn't guard it properly, and it went and it gored somebody.
Was he a paid shaymer?
And v'nigma, v'nigmar dinoi bebeis shaymer, and now in the hands of the shaymer, the bezdin paskin regarding this ox that it's a shiur haniskal that it has to be killed. And now you came along, the ganvoi ganev mi beis shaymer. Somebody stole this animal from the house of this shaymer. So now the Gemara will prove that in this case, when you steal it from the house of the shaymer and you slaughter it, it will be causing a loss to the shaymer, even though Bezdin already paskin that it has to be stoned to death. Why? Let's see. Rab Meir, so it's 2 points here. We're trying to explain the opinion of Rab Meir here in the Braisa. Rab Meir, Savala Rab Yaakov. The first point here is he holds like Rab Yaakov, and the Gemara will explain what this means. And Savala Rab Shimon. And the second point is that he holds like Rab Shimon. Number one, Savala Rab Yaakov. He holds like Rab Yaakov, the Amma that said, Af mishanigma dinai. Even a shaymer that has somebody's animal in his possession, and the bezdin already paskin that this animal has to be stoned to death. Nevertheless, hechziroi shaymer lebailov. If this shaymer goes and returns the animal to its owner as is, muchser, it's returned. Even though the owner is going to come and say to this shaymer, "This is what you're giving me back. You're giving me back an animal that bezdin already paskin that it has to be stoned to death. So I'm going to get the animal and then it's going to be stoned to death." You're not really returning to me what I gave you to safeguard. You're giving me back an animal which is worthless. But according to Rabbi Yaakov, if as long as you give back the animal as is, it's physically here and it's physically still in the same condition as when you took it, you can give back the animal as is. Uh-huh. Okay, so that's point number one. Now, point number two is v'savala k'Rab Shimon. He also, Rab Meir holds like Rab Shimon's opinion. What does Rab Shimon say? The Amar Rab Shimon says, davar hagayrim l'mamin, an object which is not worth money in itself, but it can be a cause for saving a financial loss. K'mamin dami. It has the value of money. So what does that mean? Over here, when you stole from this shaymer, this animal, and you went and slaughtered it for yourself, did you steal an animal that has real monetary value? The answer is no. Bezdin already paskins that it has to be stoned to death. You can't say that it has any monetary value. But on the other hand, though, did you now cause the shaymer to lose money? Yes. Because as long as the shaymer had this animal in his possession, he's able to return this animal to the owner. Now that you stole it from him, he's going to have to go and replace and find a proper animal to return to the owner. So true, the actual animal you stole is not something that has financial value because Bezdin says it has to be stoned to death, but you're causing a financial loss by stealing from this shaymer, this animal, and slaughtering it. Now the shaymer is going to have to replace it with a good animal. So therefore, this is considered to be a case that when you shechted it, you did cause a financial loss to the shaymer here, and therefore you'll have to pay 4 or 5 times for what you did. So this is the explanation how you have a scenario that for a shiur haniskal, you have to pay dalet v'hei. So Rabbi Yaakov also holds like Rabbi Shimon? Not necessarily. Lav dafke. Benigea to lav dafke. I don't think those two are necessarily dependent on one another. Yeah, I'm giving you back the physical animal. Rabbi Yaakov is saying you can give back the animal as is, and even though it's worthless really, but nevertheless the physical animal is here and you can return it. That's a separate point. Okay, now the Gemara, as I mentioned before, will bring a whole entire different pshat regarding Rab Meir's opinion when a person went and shechted someone's animal on Shabbos, And Rab Meir said, you're still going to be chayiv to pay. Even though you're on Machal Shabbos and you're chayiv misa. Does that mean that Rab Meir holds that whenever you're chayiv misa, you're still chayiv to pay? So before, again, the previous pshat was he didn't shecht it himself. He sent the shliach to shecht it, so he didn't do the chilul Shabbos. Now the Gemara brings another pshat. Rabba says, Lo ilam b'tevech al yedei atzma. You shechted the animal yourself, and you are chayiv misa because you're on Machal Shabbos. And still, you're going to be chayiv to pay. But Rab Meir, and the truth is, what Rab Meir's opinion is, Loike o mishala mislei. Usually the rule is that you could give two punishments of malchus and to pay at the same time. Mei su mishalem lesle. But usually when you chayiv misa, you're not going to be chayiv to pay. V'shani hani, but over here, this case, when it comes to slaughtering someone else's animal and you have to pay 4 or 5 times as much, over here it's an exception. Here, even if you chayiv misa for the chilul Shabbos, you will be chayiv to pay 4 or 5 times as much for the shechita as well. Why is this different? V'shani hani the chidushu shechitcha teira b'knas, because this whole entire concept that when you slaughter someone else's animal that you stole is a chiddush. It's not a payment for a loss. It's a penalty. It's a knas that you have to pay 4 or 5 times the value of the animal. This is a unique knas, and therefore over here there's a chiddush. Afagav de mikdal, that even though the person is being killed because of the chilul Shabbos, mishalim, nevertheless he still has to pay this knas. So a usual payment, if you chayiv misa, you don't have to pay. But over here, since it's a knas, you will have to pay. Now, as Rashi points out later on in the next plot, the Gemara is going to ask the question, if so, the same should apply to what we're speaking about in this Perek. Over here we're speaking about the knas for a girl that you were mezana with. This is also a knas. And in the next Mishnah here, it's going to say that a person that's mezana with his daughter and he's chayiv misa, you don't you pay the knas. So what Rabbi is saying does not fit with what it says later in the Mishnah. Again, Rabbi is all trying to explain Reish Lakish's answer, how to explain it regarding the Mishnayos in this Perek. So it doesn't fit into the Mishnah in our Perek. But the Gemara will later ask that question. But now here the Gemara brings the source of where Rabbi said this. V'az the Rabbi l'taimei. Rabbi follows his opinion elsewhere. Dama Rabbi said as follows. Haya gedi ganav loy. If a person had a goat that he had already stolen from somebody before Shabbos, and then v'tavche b'Shabbos, he's making a party on Shabbos and he slaughters it on Shabbos. So chayiv, he's going to be chayiv to pay the 4 or 5 times as much that you pay when you slaughter, even if it was done on Shabbos. Why? Shekran is chayiv b'geneve kaidim sheyave l'dei Shabbos. Because the geneve, when you steal some from someone, so you have to pay for what you stole, that obligation to pay came already before Shabbos. Right? So therefore, for that, the Shabbos will not pat to you. But what would the Shabbos come to pat to you from? From the knas. But the Shabbos, the fact that you chayiv misa for Shabbos will not pat you from paying a knas, because the knas is a chiddush that you chayiv to pay even when you chayiv misa. However, gona v'tovach be-Shabbos, if you both stole it and slaughtered it on Shabbos itself, potter. So then you're going to be potter to pay from anything since you chayiv misa for the chilul Shabbos. So you may say, well, I understand why you potter for the geneva, but why should you be potter for the tviche, which is a knas? So he explains, Shim ein geneva ein tviche, and ve'ein mechire. If you're not chayiv for the geneva because it was done on Shabbos, you're not chayiv for slaughtering it on Shabbos or selling it on Shabbos. That's the way Rashi explains this is, the payment of dalet v'hei, when you pay 4 or 5 times as much for what you did when you slaughtered it, for the value of this animal, it goes together with the geneva itself, meaning you chayiv to pay. If you're not going to be mechayiv the person for the actual geneva itself, so then it's going to come out that he only has to pay 3 times as much or 4 times as much. The first time of payment that you pay is for the geneva itself, and then you have to add additionally for the tvicha and mechira, where the Torah says you pay 4 or 5 times as much. But over here, if he's not paying the principal, we never find that the Torah says you have to pay 3 or 4 times as much. The chiyuv for the tvicha and mechira is only added to the original payment of 1 time, and you have to add to that another 3 or 4 times, which comes to be 4 or 5 times as much. But if you're not chayiv for the geneva because it's on Shabbos and you chayiv misa, so you're not chayiv for the tvicha and mechira either. So here you see this point that Rabbi said that if you chayiv misa, then you will not pay for geneva, but if you chayiv misa, you still will have to pay for knas. That's the chiddush regarding knas, that you pay even when you chayiv misa. Now Rabbi said the same thing in another scenario. Rabbi said, Haya gedi ganav loy. You went into someone's property, and it's already before Shabbos, and you stole a goat. Oh, sorry, this is not a case that's talking about Shabbos at all. No relation to Shabbos. You went into someone's property, and you stole a goat. And then, on your way out, in order to get out, and you don't want the owner to detect you, how are you getting out? He's digging a cave under the guy's house and going out with it. And then, in this cave, on his way out, there, in this cave, he goes and he slaughters this goat that he stole. Now, what's the halacha of somebody that is in a cave going into someone's house? Going in, or in this case, he's coming out. So in such a case, when somebody is digging a hole under your house into a machteres, the owner that confronts him is allowed to kill the person that's trying to get into your house. Baba, this is the concept of Baba Machteres. Because somebody that's digging a cave under your house and coming to steal, he's coming to steal, and if you're going to try to stop him, he's going to be ready to kill as well. So this is part of the halacha of Abala Hargach, Hashkim Lahargach. If the guy is coming and digging under your house and he's ready to kill you, you're allowed to kill him. He has no blood. Ein loy damim, you're allowed to go ahead and kill him. Okay, so another point is that this person which is in the Machteres is like he's chayiv misa. His blood is, you're allowed to kill him. Now, while this person was in the machteres, he went and he shechted this goat that he had stole already before. So in such a case, chayiv, you're gonna have to pay the penalty, the knas of paying 4 or 5 times for the shechita that you did there in this cave. You're gonna have to pay for this. Why? Shekar nes chayiv, shekvar nes chayiv begneve kodim sheyavo lidei is a machteres. Because the geneva, the principle that you have to pay for the geneva, that you were chayiv already before. In the machteres, all you did is just slaughtering. So over here, you chayiv knas. So again, this is the rule Rabbi is saying, that any time you chayiv misa, and at the same time of the chayiv misa, there's also a chayiv of knas, you do pay both together. Misa and knas go together. However, the chayiv misa is the fact that the person is allowed to kill you. That's the chayiv misa. At that moment, the person is allowed to kill you. Chayiv misa at that moment. Okay, but if ganav v'tovach b'machteres, if the geneva and the tvicha, the slaughtering, was all in the machteres, he didn't steal the goat in advance already. He's digging a cave, coming into the person's house, and he's pulling the goat out into the machteres. So right now is when the geneva is taking place, and right now he's slaughtering it all in the machteres. Then potter. Then he's going to be potter to pay not only for the geneva, but he's going to be potter to pay for the whole entire penalty of 4 and 5 as well. Shem ein geneva, ein tvicha, ve'en mechira. If there's no geneva, then there's no tvicha, no mechira. Again, this is the point that Rabbi is saying here, that if you're being chayiv to pay for the geneva while you're chayiv misa, so then that goes back to the regular rule that you don't pay money when you're chayiv misa. Okay, but if you're chayiv for a knas while you're chayiv misa, a knas you do pay for when you're chayiv misa. To know how to steal. Okay, there you go. Says the Gemara. Now, why do we need both of these cases? We need. They had to tell us. Rabbi had to tell us both of these cases, even though it's saying the same point. Both of these cases are making the point that money you don't pay when you're chayiv misa, but knas you do pay when you're chayiv misa. Tzriche, but why does he say both of these points? Diyashmin Shabbos. If we're telling me the halacha of Shabbos, now according to Rashi's pshat in this Gemara, the Gemara is talking about the case over here when the Chiv Misa is going to pater you from paying the payment of the Geneva. So if would tell me regarding Shabbos that because you Chiv Misa for Shabbos, so therefore you don't pay for the Geneva, Mishum di Isura Isser Eilam, because Shabbos is a kind of an Isser which is forever, meaning you're Mechayiv a person Misa for Shabbos, you're Mechayiv in Misa even later on. Not only at that moment when he does the Chilul Shabbos. Later on, you bring him to the Bezdin, and forever, even years later, if Adam will come and say that he was Mechal Shabbos, he'll be Chayiv Misa. So maybe it's this kind of Chayiv Misa that will pater him to pay. Avo Machteres, the Isser Shahu, by the case of Machteres, later on you can't kill this person. You can't bring him to Bezdin later and kill. It's only at that moment when he's there digging this cave under your house, then you can be Mechayiv and Misa. Eimeloi, maybe this is not a kind of Chayiv Misa that paters you from paying. In the reverse, via Shmina Machteres, if he would tell you the halacha of Machteres, I would say, Mishum de Machteres, Zui Yasra Asai. In the case of Machteres, we see over here that the Chiv Misa is very severe. You don't even give him a warning. If the guy comes into a cave, into your house, you can kill him without warning him at all. Maybe that's the kind of Misa that absolves you of paying. Avol Shabbos, the boy Yasra, maybe by Shabbos, where he has to have a warning, some Emelite, maybe that kind of Chiv Misa does not pater you of paying. tzriche. So therefore, Rabbi had to say both of these cases. This is Rashi's pshat in the Gemara, that he have to teach you in both cases that you'd be potter to pay because of the different types of chiv misa that pater you from paying. Taisvis, the Rishonim have a different shot in this Gemara. Okay, but let's stick with Rashi for now.
Limitations for Shabbos.
Right, correct. Rav Papa said a similar halacha, seemingly repeating what Rabbi said. Haisa para genuvalai. Again, similar kind of halacha. If you had an ox that you already stole before Shabbos, and then v'tavcha b'Shabbos, you slaughtered it on Shabbos, chayiv. So you'll be chayiv to pay for what you slaughtered. Why? The geneva you were chayiv to pay already from before Shabbos. What did you do on Shabbos? You slaughtered it. So for that you chayiv a knas. So for a knas you chayiv even when you chayiv a misa for Shabbos. However, haisa para shu'ulalai. If you had a pada, a cow that you had already borrowed from someone from before Shabbos, v'tavcha b'Shabbos, and then you slaughtered this on Shabbos, pater. So for this, you're going to be pater. Because what's happening over here? When's the geneva taking place? The geneva is taking place at the same exact second when you slaughtered it. You borrowed it, so it was in your possession without geneva. The moment you're slaughtering it is the moment that the geneva is taking place. So therefore, the geneva together with the tvicha is taking place on Shabbos. So therefore, the fact that you chayiv misa paters you from paying the geneva that took place on Shabbos, and it paters you also from paying the knas. What is Rav Papa saying here? He's repeating the same halacha as Rabbi. Rav Papa, para salashminon. Is Rav Papa coming to teach me that the same halacha that Rabbi said before regarding a goat, that the same halacha applies regarding a cow? The only difference between what he said and what Rabbi said is whether it's a goat or a cow. But it's the exact same halacha. So what is his chiddush? So he answered him, Rav Papa shu'ula asalashmina. No, Rav Papa, actually there is a chiddush in the second part of what he said regarding when you borrow this cow. What's the chiddush here? So because I would think to say as follows. Rav Papa. Since Rav Papa himself said, when a person borrows a cow or borrows anything, what's the halacha? He said as follows: Mishas Meshiche, from the moment that you pull it, that you take it into your possession, when you borrowed it, Hu des chayvle b'mzoy naseha. You're going to be obligated to feed this animal in order to take care of it, in order to be able to return it properly to its owner. So from that very moment, you chayiv to feed it. So hachanami, maybe I would think to say that the same applies. Mishas she'elo, from the moment that you borrowed it, is chayiv b'ainsei. It's from that moment that you're really obligated to pay back to the owner any einus that happens to it. You're kained it from that moment, and therefore, when you come and slaughter it on Shabbos, so you're going to say the chiyuv to pay for the animal itself that belongs to the owner, that chiyuv came already before Shabbos. So the chiyuv for the principle that you have to return, that's already before Shabbos. When you slaughtered it, the only chiyuv that there is now is just for the knas, for the tvicha, the fact that you slaughtered it. And therefore, that the chiyuv misa of Shabbos will not pater you from. So Kamash Malan, that's a chiddush that Rav Papa came to say over here, that as long as you have the cow itself that you borrowed in your possession, you could return the cow itself. It's the moment that you go and you shecht it, now is when you're stealing it. Now you can't return the cow itself. Now you're becoming obligated. Now there's a new obligation that you have to pay the value, the money of this cow that you just shechted. So therefore the geneva is taking place on Shabbos. If the geneva is taking place on Shabbos, so therefore the chiyuv misa of Shabbos is patering you from the geneva, and therefore it paters you also from the tvicha as well. So that was a chiddush of Rav Papa.
In one word, what's a kamash malan?
That the geneva is taking place on Shabbos. You may have thought to say that the geneva really it's as if it really took place from before Shabbos. Because really the chiyuv that you have to return this animal is already from before Shabbos. You take that responsibility from the moment that you borrow it. Kamash malan, no. Before I shechted it, I could have returned the animal itself. Exactly. It's the moment that I shecht it that I'm chayiv. That's when there's a new obligation now to pay. Now the Gemara here brings a machlokes about this. Now, this is not so pashut. Not everybody agrees to this, but it applies it in a different scenario. Omar Rave, so Rave said, what happens? Haniach len aviyim parashu'ula. You have children, their father borrowed a cow, and he died, and now this cow is in their possession here. Mishtamshim ba kol yemei sheilasa. They're allowed to use this cow for all of that time period that the father borrowed it for. Mesa, if this cow died in the children's possession, ein chayavim b'insa. They're not going to be obligated to pay the owner for something that happened, which is an einus. Usually, when you borrow, you're responsible for an einus as well, even something that was out of your control.
The father would
That's
be
right. But the children, though, that never accepted that level of responsibility, they didn't borrow it. They're not going to be chayav for any einus. Kisvur and shalaviyani. What happens if they had this cow that was in their father's possession? They had no idea that the father borrowed this cow. They thought it belonged to the father. And what had happened? They went and they slaughtered it and they ate it. They had no clue. So in such a case, they're going to have to reimburse the owner, but they only have to pay a cheap payment for this meat that they ate. What is this cheap payment? So Rashi here brings from the Gemara there that says in Basra that they pay arba donkey, which means they only pay 2/3 of what they ate. And also they have to give back the hide of the animal. But the point of here basically is they're not chayev for the actual geneva that they stole because they had no idea. What are they chayev for? For the hana. The benefit that they had, the hana, they are chayev for. The fact is you benefited from what belongs to someone else. The halacha, when you benefit from someone else in a way that you're not a mazik, you're not a ganev, you had no idea what you were doing, you thought it belonged to you. In such a case, you don't pay the full payment of a ganev or a mazik, but you do pay for the hana, which is 2/3. 2/3. That's what they have to pay for over here. Now, the Braise, or actually Rava that is, continues and he says, if the father left achrayis nechasim. The term achrayis nechasim means if the father left properties. He left properties that are here available that if the owner of this cow wants, he can come and collect to get reimbursed for this cow that was now lost or is now not here anymore. So then chayavim l'shalom. They're going to have to pay from those properties that their father left for them for this owner of the cow. Now the full payment, right? But the question, the question though is, what is this last statement going on? When it says here that if there's properties that the father left, that they're going to have to pay the owner, what is this going on? There are those that say this goes back to the first part of the statement over here, which means when it said in the first part of the statement that it died and there was an einus, and because it died by einus, they're not responsible for this einus. So on that, he's saying, but if there's properties that belong to the father, so then that properties of the father will be responsible to pay. That's one version. One moment. But there are those that say that when it says here that the owner of this cow could collect from the father's properties, that goes on the second part of the statement, which is when they went and they slaughtered it and they ate it, thinking that it belongs to them. So the Gemara now explains, the one that says that it goes on to the case of the reisha when there was an einus and it died. Most definitely it goes on the case of the seifa as well, when they knowingly went and shechted it. They went and shechted this animal. It didn't just die by einus, they went and shechted it. So what's the point over here that we're saying? That an einus happened. Right? And if an einus happened, the children don't take any responsibility for this einus that occurred, that they were not the borrowers. The father was the borrower. But if they're not the borrowers, they're not responsible. But the question though is a father responsible for an einus that takes place after he dies? He's not alive anymore. So now after he's not alive, he can't take responsibility for an einus that happened. The question though is, maybe when he borrowed it, he took the responsibility for the einus then, when he borrowed it, and therefore he's going to be responsibility for the einus even after he passes away. How? That his properties become mishubed. His properties are there's going to be a lien on his properties that he's going to have to pay for this einus.
How would you know?
So just a second. The question is, what's the halacha? This opinion argues on the point that Rav Papa said before. What did Rav Papa say before? When a person borrows the cow, the einus that happens is not something that he takes responsibility for right then. At that moment, he says, the cow is still here. I'll give you back the cow itself. When does the chiyuv of the einus begin? When the einus happens. That's when the chiyuv for the einus begins. So if so, when a father borrows a cow and he dies, and then later the einus happens in the children's possession, the father is not obligated for that einus, because the einus that had died happened after the father died. Mm-hmm. So therefore, even if there's properties that belong to the father, the properties of the father, you cannot collect from it to pay for this einus. The einus happened after he died. He's not responsibility for an einus. That's according to Rav Papa. Because Rav Papa says you only chayiv for the oinus when the oinus happens. But if you argue with Rav Papa, so then you say from the moment you borrow a cow, even though the cow is still here, you're taking now responsibility for any potential oinus that will happen later. So if that oinus happens later, even after this person dies, but nevertheless, while he was alive, he took responsibility for the oinus then, and therefore any properties that belongs to him, even after he dies, there's a lien on his properties, and you're going to have to pay for it. That's one opinion over here. But according to the other opinion, the one that says only regarding the seifa, which is a case where they actually went and slaughtered it. They went with their own hands and slaughtered this animal. They thought it belonged to them. And therefore, in such a case, we say that if there's the father's properties here, you're going to have to pay for it. That's only in that case when they went and slaughtered it. But in the Reisha, which is a case where there was an oines, so then the father's properties are not going to be obligated to pay for this. And v'haina de Rav Papa. This is the point that Rav Papa said before, that the father does not take responsibility for the oines at the moment when he borrowed it. The chiyuv for the oines comes only when the oines happens. And that's later, after he passed away. So therefore, there's no lien on those properties. That's exactly what Rav Papa said before. So we see here that there's an argument about this point that Rav Papa said, that you chayiv for an oines. When does that chiyuv for the oines come? When the oines happens? Or from the moment that you borrowed it, you're taking now responsibility, and there's a lien right away in your properties for any potential oines that will happen. Okay, one more shtickle, let's finish off over here. The Gemara now goes back to the two answers that we had for the Mishnayos, the stira of the Mishnah over here in Kesubos and the Mishnah in Malkus. Again, Makis. What was the stira? In our Mishnah it says you pay knas. In the Mishnah in Malkus it says that you get Malkus. So Rabbi Yechanan said that it depends if you got a warning or not. If you get a warning, you get Malkus. If you didn't get a warning, you pay. And what did Rish Lakish say? Rish Lakish says it goes according to Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says you can get both at the same time. You can get Malkus and pay at the same time. So now the Gemara says, Bishleim Rabbi Yechanan le'yama keresh Lakish. Rabbi Yechanan does not answer like Rish Lakish, the kamaykim laka Rabbanan, because Rabbi Yechanan is trying to explain that our Mishnah should follow Rabbanan's opinion, that you do not give Malkus and payment at the same time. So therefore Rabbi Yechanan says the case is that he got no warning. So there's no Malkus. Rish Lakish, my time Rabbi Yechanan. Why did Rish Lakish not want to say like Rabbi Yechanan's answer? Very simple answer. There was no warning, so therefore you pay. Amalach. So Rish Lakish will answer you here, and this is a very fundamental point regarding Kamli b'derabim minei. Kiv in the ilu asru bei potter. If he would have got a warning and there is malchus, so then he would be potter from paying because he's getting malchus. Ki loy asru bei nami potter. Even if you got no warning and there's no actual malchus, but it's a kind of a isser that there would be malchus. If there was a warning, you would still be potter of paying. As long as it's a kind of isser that there's a chi of malchus potentially, even if there's no actual malchus because there was no warning, you're still going to be potter from paying. They are following their opinion that they said elsewhere. He said as follows: a person that did an isser, and he did it b'shoigig, and it's a kind of an isser that if you did it b'mezid, you would have been chayiv misa, but he only did it b'shoigig, so there's no actual misa. The chayave malki is shoigigin, or something that you did that b'mezid you chayiv malkis, but you only did it b'shoigig, so there's no actual chayiv malkis. And v'davar acher, together with something else that you chayiv to pay money. So the question is, in such a case, does the chayiv misa or the chayiv malkis absolve you from paying? Rabbi Yechanan Amar chayiv. Rabbi Yechanan says you chayiv to pay, because there's no actual chiv misa here. There's no actual chiv malchus here. Rish Lakish says potter. You're going to be potter because even though there's no actual chiv misa or malchus, but because it's an isser that there would, but that this is a level of isser that there could be a chiv misa or malchus, that itself patters you. Rabbi Yechanan says you're going to be chayiv the holay asrebe. He wasn't warned, so there's no chiv misa, there's no chiv malchus, so you got to pay. Shlakish potter. Shlakish says you're still going to be potter. Kivin the ilu asrube potter. Since if you would have gotten a warning, so he would have been chayiv misa, he would have been potter. Kili asrube nami potter. The same applies even if you did not get a warning and there's no actual chiv misa here, but because it's a kind of isser that there could be a chiv misa, the concept of kamle b'derabim minei still applies.